Hello and welcome to the World Advanced Therapies and Regenerative Medicine Congress Interview Zone. My name is Freya Least, I'm the editor for RegMedNet and I'll be your host for today. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Rice from Cello Health. Mike, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Freya. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. So for those of us that might not know who Cello Health is, can you give us a little bit of background on the company?
Yeah, sure. And maybe I'll just start out with a little bit of background on myself and
Fantastic.
sort of how I came here.
Yeah.
I'm actually have worked with a seminal lab that had invented an early gene editing technology back in the late 1990s, 2000, when a lot of this was really a hypothesis. You know, some of the early gene transduction experiments, the first clinical trial at the NIH had showed some significant durable effects for ADA SCID. And that sort of, triggered a lot of interest and investment into the field at a time when, there was very little known about, the safety of the vectors, how to actually manufacture them, and really nothing was known about durability, right? So that was sort of the first, wave of interest in gene therapy, and then after that. We were very fortunate to license out the gene editing technology to a broad base of industries, from human therapeutics to diagnostics to agricultural biotech. And at that time, I had transitioned from being a scientific research bench scientist into going on road shows and transitioning into business development and the finance side of things, and learned very quickly the challenges and the reality of being able to use capital effectively, draw investment, and then what was really necessary was to get some focus from all the things that you could do with a broad-based technology.
Yeah.
How do you focus on things that are going to inflect the most value in the near term for proving the principle of the platform, but also providing potential values to partners down the road and gaining additional funding. So I spent about 10 years as sort of a biotech entrepreneur, bringing in academic programs and intellectual property, mostly from Philadelphia-based universities.
Yeah.
And then putting them into incubators and launching companies. And the easiest route was ag biotech at the time, because the regulatory environment for gene therapy was very stringent, and basically investment kind of was drawn out of the sector. So then I had the fortunate ability to come into and use these skills into the consulting world. First at Defined Health, now Cello Health Bioconsulting is our new name. We were acquired a couple of years ago, and we just made a brand transition. So if you know Defined Health, we're now Cello Health Bioconsulting. And here, I basically have brought all that experience and skills into helping advanced therapeutics companies, whether they are viral vector gene transfer, cell therapies, nucleic acid technologies, and even some biologics. And it's a very broad definition that goes outside of advanced therapeutics. But essentially, all the same things help them focus of all the potential applications that you could go after. How do you focus from a scientific, clinical, commercial perspective, and also for large pharma and large cap biotech, we do search and evaluation for things that fill gaps in their portfolio. So we help them with scientific diligence and provide forecasting evaluations.
Fantastic, very thorough, thank you. So you mentioned a few times value. So obviously in this space we're used to sort of a patient's idea of value. But what's the developer or investor's idea of value?
Yeah, so essentially, so we're in a really transformational time for this sector, and it's very exciting, and it's great to see it kind of come full, circle back to the evidence that we had basically 20 years ago, of being able to stably correct a defect in a mutation, or being able to modify a immune cell and have a regenerative medicine approach. However, we're now at a time where investors can inflect value very rapidly especially with the favorable regulatory environment through RMAT designation and other designations, where essentially we've done an analysis where we looked at time from preclinical research to proof of concept, clinical proof of concept, to potential launch of, retrospectively looking at the initial, several products that have been approved in the CAR T cell space, and Luxturna, and probably soon Zolgensma for SMA from Avexis Novartis, and many others coming forward, and we're seeing a very rapid transition from establishing proof of concept to thinking about all the challenges that you need to commercialize the drug, right? So all of a sudden, your organization needs to transform from being scientifically focused to thinking about, how do you scale up the manufacturing? How do you, come up with a logistical distribution plan that is, feasible and not, too onerous? How do you develop contracting with payers to risk share on, what could be very expensive one-time durable treatments? And we've seen that there are several models that are out now for risk sharing. And all that, kind of needs to come together to think about, how do you further develop and commercialize the product? But at the end of the day, it needs to be to provide value to all the stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem. So, the clinicians need to believe in the product, trust that it's actually going to be, manufactured and delivered back to them, so they can provide it to the patient that is waiting for it. The patient needs to trust that what they're, that they're not just a guinea pig, that they're actually going to benefit from it. And many of these products in the rare disorders and the oncology setting have been initially funded by patient advocacy groups, so they all have sort of a vested interest in the future of it. And at the end of the day, you have a payer that is somewhat financing these products. So if they don't have evidence that you're going to have 5-10 years of benefit out of a upfront treatment, that in an ideal world, the manufacturer would like to get paid up front. And so that we have these contracting schemes where essentially there are rebates that are provided if there's evidence that the patient is not getting benefit for X number of years. And then Bluebird's kind of doing the opposite, where they're actually foregoing an upfront payment, just taking 20%, and they're basically being paid over the next 5 years for that therapeutic. So, it's a very sort of intricate space right now that we are learning. We're learning on the job, right? So none of the models are great, and all the models will be unique to particular diseases or patient populations. We're defining the endpoints and the metrics. How do we know that a patient's still benefiting from therapy? I mean, some of the diseases are like SMA are essentially lethal, where babies are not living past a year or a year and a half. But other ones are they're more they're not lethal diseases. They're providing functional benefit, independent living, things like that. So we need to develop models that take in not just a poly system, but also and we're actually members of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, is doing a great job in advocating for policy and harmonizing frameworks for evaluation. And providing a framework for evaluating and coming up with some of the risk sharing schemes between the U.S. and Europe and across different payer types. So I think in the next several years, there's going to be a lot of transformation, a lot of policy developed, and it will pave way for future advanced therapeutics developers. Right now, probably the first products won't be the best products. And I think we're learning a lot about that now in the CAR T space, where it's just very logistically challenging and labor intensive to make autologous CAR T products. And there's a lot of QC problems right now. I'm sure you've seen the stories on the news about patients not getting QC FDA standard product back. They're essentially having to give them an inferior product just because they can't manufacture it to specifications. So what I say is the first products, these are first demand products, and it's likely we'll see a rapid evolution of the field, eventually to allogeneic and ultimately maybe off-the-shelf iPSC cell lines that are universally accessible to patients.
Wow, so that's so many stakeholders, so many different moving parts to have to think about. When let's say Cello Health, when Cello Health is trying to come up with these models to assess value, look at investment potential, where are you getting this information from?
Well, so we have a great team of analysts that essentially are looking at the landscape of management of basically thousands of different diseases, especially if we're talking about rare genetic diseases.
Yeah.
Potentially could be thousands of them. And we're kind of looking at the field and finding out where, how solid is understanding the biology, what's going on in drug development, where new things coming on the horizon, what patient populations might be impacted. But we also, we do primary research with a broad array of stakeholders, from clinical trialists that are the key opinion leading experts in the field that are designing trials, that are managing patients and have basic research interests in it. We also interact with the patient advocacy groups. I've had a long history working with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society to help them target investment into riskier but potentially disruptive and groundbreaking work, which led to some of the CAR T field advances. And also we also talk directly to patients, because everybody has a little bit of different perspective of what needs that they want out of a particular therapeutic.
And I mean, it's great that these are all being worked on, but it sounds like we're not going to have a concrete model that can be applied across the industry for a little while. When is this going to come? When can developers start applying it to their own work?
I mean, it's all case by case basis, right? What's really kind of interesting is that there's such a diverse approaches. There's so many different, in vivo therapeutics, ex vivo therapeutics, AAV therapeutics, lentiviral vectors, nucleic acid therapeutics. Now the first siRNA products have been approved, and a multitude of approaches that are all beyond proof of concept. They've led to approved products, and but they all have their sort of different models, and they've been applied across malignant, non-malignant diseases, and and they all have their sort of different challenges. So I think it's all going to be a case-by-case basis on whatever therapeutic platform is being employed and whatever disease patient population you're looking at.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, the future certainly seems bright. Mike, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Well, thank you, Freya. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back with more interviews from the Interview Zone very shortly.